Hi, everyone. Welcome to our November webinar. We're going to be talking about a number of different natural disasters and what you should know when it comes to potential mold problems, assessments, things like that. So we're actually kind of late in the season for things in North America, like tornadoes and hurricanes, but this content will be relevant across the country throughout the year. So we will wait just a few moments to allow people to join in, and then we'll get started. So again, we'll be talking natural disasters and what you should know when it comes to doing mold assessments, um, tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, etc. So we'll go ahead and get started. So if you've been on our webinars before, thanks for coming back. The first part is always the same. We do a quick introduction to us, our company, etc. And then we'll dig into the actual content. Like I said, we'll talk about the connection between natural disasters and mold, some scenarios and some specific mold risks, and how you can help your clients. There'll be some time for questions at the end, but if you have questions as I'm going through the content, just post them in the chat, and we will answer them as we go. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dylan McIntosh. I'm the Director of Operations here at Sporecyte. I'm a certified industrial hygienist. I have a professional background in doing building assessments for mold, indoor air quality, as well as commercial and industrial testing as well. Our company, we are TechSite is the name of our company. Sporecyte is the name of our environmental product. So we were founded in 2013. We are a software company that creates digital diagnostic software that utilizes machine learning and artificial intelligence focused on digital microscopy. And we're used by a number of different industries across the globe. So Sporecyte is our environmental brand product line. Our human diagnostic tests is under TechSite. We have a collaboration with Mayo Clinic, and our vet product is labeled under Zoetis Vet Scan Images, Zoetis being a global leader in animal health. Our lab, so Sporecyte, we operate a production lab for air quality samples related to mold, spore trap samples specifically, and surface samples for mold as well. We are an AIHA MPAT participant. We have a Texas mold analysis laboratory license, and we're ISO 17025 accredited. Our sales pitch is really, really general. $20 a sample, same day turnaround time, and we have optional overnight shipping as well. So with that said, we'll jump right into the content for today. So connecting natural disasters to mold is what we'll start with. So general information about mold. Mold requires just a few things to grow in the built environment, namely moisture, organic material as a food source, and some amount of time where both of those exist. There's some specific other things as well, but generally speaking, the indoor environments, temperature, pH, things like that are all suitable for mold growth if moisture is introduced. So in a natural disaster, mold might not be, and most likely isn't your primary concern, right? If you're worried about the health and safety of yourself, your family, your pets, the actual structural integrity of the home, depending on the scale of the disaster, you might not even be thinking about mold, and you wouldn't be thinking about mold for some time, which is kind of why it's a perfect storm for when there has been a disaster. The property is not a total loss, but is not something that's on the forefront of your mind. So we'll kind of jump into some scenarios, a number of different ones we'll talk about. Depending on where you are in the country, this may or may not be exactly specific to you, but some of these pointers are pretty universal. So the first one, talking about flooding, hurricanes. This advice really goes to any major precipitation event. Doesn't necessarily have to be a hurricane, but when there's been standing water in a home, a lot of building materials can absorb and wick moisture inside of them, things like drywall, flooring, insulation, as well as long-term humidity. So humidity is something that can be contributed to by standing water, but it can also just be environmentally. So if your home, if you had to evacuate and you haven't been in the home for days or weeks, indoor humidity levels can build, and chronic humidity issues can lead to mold growth without the actual liquid water being present. So mold can grow uh, under the right conditions starting as soon as 24 to 48 hours. And like I mentioned before, humidity, it's not just related to the rain or the flooding in the structure. It could just be ambient elevated humidity in a place like Florida can make that problem even worse. So a quote here from the Florida Department of Health: if mold is not dealt with, it's just going to continue to be a bigger problem and more pronounced in your home. I mentioned 24 to 48 hours. That's when mold can begin to grow, but it can continue to grow and grow more widespread, grow onto building materials, as well as actual belongings in the home, furniture, clothing, etc. If the conditions persist long enough. So a big case study that happened, a number of case studies came out of Hurricane Katrina, but one that was done by the CDC in the US inspected 112 homes affected by flooding and found that nearly half of them had visible mold growth. So these are homes that were not total losses, homes that had been re-inhabited, but still showed signs of mold growth months after the hurricane. So tornadoes and other severe storms, when you have severe winds, this can go for hurricanes as well, but when you have severe wind, that can contribute to structural breakdowns or systemic breakdowns of the home, like a roofing leak, broken windows, water intrusion from above or below. These are all ways that moisture can be introduced into the home and into the building materials inside of the home. Anytime those materials get damp or wet for a period of time, you run a risk of mold growth, especially when it comes to things like roof leaks. Roof leaks can cause pretty persistent mold problems that can be hard to exactly track down the extent. Mold will, or moisture will kind of follow the path of least resistance from top to bottom following gravity, but that doesn't always necessarily mean straight down. The moisture can run along uh, things like conduit or other building materials and can kind of uh, show up inside of wall cavities that may not be directly below where the source of the leak was. So they can be kind of hard to track down exactly the extent of the moisture damage. Wildfires, while the fire itself isn't going to, cause mold, it's actually the firefighting efforts afterwards. When there's fires, typically it's going to be put out by some amount of water, even if it's not your home that had a structural fire, if your neighbor's home or maybe a detached building, a garage or something, that water can still impact your home. Some buildings may have sprinkler systems or fire suppression systems. All of those things uh, can lead to mold growth. So that moisture has to go somewhere. And a lot of the times when there's been a structure fire, you're not going to be moving back in right away. So that moisture can go unnoticed and persist for quite a while, leading to an even larger restoration effort when it comes to remediating mold, as well as demolishing all the impacted materials and building it back. Earthquakes can crack things like water lines, sewer lines, foundations, etc., allow for water intrusion in pathways that weren't there prior. So all of those things can either create a water problem in the instance of plumbing, or allow for moisture to work in the next time it rains. For example, foundation cracks. These can be immediate. If a water main supply line breaks, you're going to have water extremely fast right away. But if there's a major foundation crack or flaw that develops as the event of the earthquake, it may take quite a while for you to notice that maybe the next big rainstorm. And in the instance of a place, like Southern California, where rain is not always going to be happening every week or every month even, it can go quite a while before those get noticed. And then the last one, winter storms and ice dams being a part of a major potential water problem. So when heavy snow lands on the roof, there's a type of issue that can happen called ice damming. That's when the snow directly in contact with the roof melts and then it refreezes as ice. It can then allow for a lot of liquid water to pool, and the static pressure of that liquid water sitting on the shingles can work its way in and cause leaks that way. Burst pipes when temperatures are sub-zero and get very, very cold. You can have ice form inside of the pipes, which can then burst and cause leaks, as well as winter storms followed by a very warm temperature. Here in Chicago about 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but we did have a point in time when there was about 2 feet of snow on the ground. And then we had a very warm spell the following week where all that ice or all that snow had melted. And then that moisture can also cause, when there's major snow melt events, can cause water problems that had previously, not been an issue. People can oftentimes shovel snow against or close to the foundation of the home. So when that snow melts, it turns to water. It can saturate the earth next to the foundation, causing water to come into the building. And then ultimately, like I said before, any moisture problem that's persistent for 24 to 48 hours at minimum can begin to develop mold. So what is your role as an inspector? So as someone who is testing professionally for mold, assessing environments for water damage and moisture, what can you do to help in these situations? So most of these are going to be outside of your typical real estate transaction inspection. This would be a standalone service that you could provide to past clients or completely new clients to do inspections after disaster. So you would be doing detailed moisture evaluation, looking for active current moisture with things like an infrared camera or a moisture meter, checking for discoloration, stains, water intrusion, signs of water intrusion throughout the home. You can educate the clients, explain these risks to your clients, what to keep an eye out for in the event of a natural disaster, severe weather, and then following up with next steps, depending on what is found or what you determine, following up with additional testing, remediation, or additional evaluation. Some situations you may not be able to determine exactly what the issues are, so you would call in a more specialized environmental consultant. And then, bringing those tools, like I mentioned, infrared camera, moisture meter to assist with finding current moisture and water damage, mold sampling equipment to take air or surface samples to help your client make the best decisions possible. So part of doing mold assessments and mold testing is knowing when and when not to test. So if you're coming into a home that's been severely water damaged and there is large, widespread, visibly noticeable mold growth inside of the home, you don't really need to specifically test in an environment like that because it is so bad. You can visually tell just based off of growth patterns and such that this home has been severely impacted. Or when a home is a total loss, it's at that point the mold is the least the worries in that situation. So you don't need to test in those extreme circumstances. But when you do find signs or potential issues, those are the situations where testing can be very helpful. If water damage has been found or structural issues have been found, um, and there are materials that may be able to support mold growth getting damp, you can test in those circumstances. So I know some inspectors work closely with insurance companies. So if you're being called out by an insurance company you work with to do an evaluation and testing for documentation purposes or claim purposes, that's clearly an important time to test. If there's a client purchasing a property before, directly after, or in a property that has disclosed, severe damage from a natural disaster or severe weather, testing, knowing those disclosures are a part of what you should be checking out. And then post remediation. If, for example, the first situation on the DOT test, there's a large mold problem after a hurricane, you can come out and do a post remediation verification to determine that the property is or isn't ready to be re-inhabited, depending on those results. So something that we've generated that we'll be sending out after this webinar are a few templates that you can use to help market this. There's a post-hurricane and a post-tornado template. Now, you could alter these a little bit to fit your needs. Maybe you don't live in a place where hurricanes or tornadoes are all that common, but maybe you do have severe rainstorms or severe thunderstorms or other severe weather that could cause flooding or severe moisture problems inside of a home. Those things can be repurposed. So you can find it now on our website with our marketing toolkit. We have a lot of other materials there as well to help you as an inspector communicate and market the services that you can provide as well. So just some really quick summaries before we jump to questions. Mold is, a secondary, oftentimes a secondary concern after the initial severe weather event. So, like I mentioned before, if there's severe flooding or wind damage or tornado damage or fire damage, that is almost always the primary concern. But the mold aspect is something that you should keep in mind and can down the road become an equal concern to the materials and belongings inside of the home. And then you as the inspector can be a trusted resource to help identify potential risks and potential areas that may have problematic, doing testing to determine for your clients if there is or isn't potential mold issues inside of the home, and provide them with a resolution on how to resolve those issues, whether it be remediation, etc. So this month's webinar was quick. It was, we're getting into the holiday season, so we know there won't be as many inspectors on these webinars as people start to get busy with closing out the year on a strong foot and getting into the holidays. So we still intend to have another webinar next month and in January. So we welcome you to join us for those webinars. I'll see if we have some questions that are coming in. All right, I've got one question here. So Nick asked, should inspectors always test after flooding or only when mold is suspected? So anytime you have flooding, mold should be suspected unless it's a flooding event that was happened, was caught and resolved within that 24 to 48 hour time period. So anytime when there's been flooding and it isn't fully resolved within that 24 to 48 hour time period, mold should be suspected, and testing is something that should be done. I would always recommend you don't want to test too soon. If that moisture or flooding water problem hasn't been, the source hasn't been identified and the source hasn't been resolved, you could come out immediately after test. There hasn't been anything that grows yet, but then that water problem isn't resolved and growth happens a week later, as another rainstorm comes through or something. So yeah, I would say most often there will be a suspected mold problem. It's just the scale and how widespread it is. And my one suggestion is if the problem has been determined, figured out, and resolved, or is working towards being resolved, you could test at that point. But generally speaking, unless it's been very minor and cleaned up very quickly, you probably have a suspicion for mold growth. Kevin asked, how do I decide whether to use air sampling or surface sampling after a disaster? So it's not a decision either or. You could do one, you could do the other, you could do both. It depends on the specific circumstances and what kind of questions you're trying to answer. Air samples answer different questions than surface samples. So air samples would be determining, is there an elevated level of mold in the air affecting the air quality? It can be indicative of potential hidden growth. Where surface sampling would tell me, is this discoloration on this material mold growth? What kind of mold growth is it, etc. So it's not an either or question. It's oftentimes both, and how many of either. We have more resources on our website, previous webinars, blog posts, etc., that can help you learn more about when to do a surface sample versus an air sample. Michael asked, do you compare indoor versus outdoor samples differently when everything outside has been affected by a disaster? No, generally speaking, it's not. You don't have a different interpretation for indoor versus outdoor. It stays pretty much the same, regardless of pre or after a disaster. There are, depending on the types of disasters, for example, wildfires, that's one where the outdoor air can be severely impacted. Even if that specific neighborhood that may have been impacted by a wildfire or a structure fire has been put out, there still may be severe air quality problems. So sampling shorter duration for the outdoor sample may be appropriate, but for things like precipitation, flooding, etc., there's really no difference. And then I've got another question here regarding what thermal imaging camera do you recommend? If you don't have one, I recommend just getting one. I don't have a specific brand or model. They've gotten much more affordable now than they were 5-10 years ago. So it's a piece of tool that you should have in your kit. There are ones that are a couple $100. There's ones that can connect to your cell phone, and then there's standalone ones with large feature sets. For evaluation, I like infrared cameras that have a composite view. This is where they will display the infrared portion over top of a digital image of the area. To me, that has been very helpful. Just when you just have infrared camera data of a blank wall, it can be hard to remember when you're back at your desk writing up a report where that exact area was, where if you have a composite digital IR image can be more helpful. I have a question here. It's not directly on topic, but I'll answer it. So Joseph asks, in your experience, are Sporecyte lab results admissible evidence in court? Specifically in California, I testify frequently as an expert regarding substandard living conditions, breach of implied warranty, and habitability and data interpretation. So this is a question with a lot of nuance. Our test results have been used in litigation as evidence, and they have been, used in those instances. A lot of we get this question a lot. Are your reports legally defensible? And it's all dependent on the actual actions of the inspector. Our lab results will hold up, but what oftentimes gets inspectors in trouble are when they get questioned about their actual methods. Was the pump calibrated? How did you know the pump was calibrated? Where did you take the sample from? Why did you take the sample from that area, etc.? The actual action of collecting the samples. So, we talked about our laboratory's credentials and qualifications. On that aspect, it gets held up, permissible as evidence, but each specific legal case is going to be hyper specific to the details of that case. And that goes with not just our lab, but any lab's results. So it's not that a yes or no answer. We have stood up our business and our operations in a way to help back up the data as best as we can for your case. But then there's that other half that gets involved as well. In winter storm cases, does it take longer for mold to start growing versus in the summer months? Typically not really. Maybe if there's an extreme case where the home is loss of major ice storm, home is loss of power for a week, so the internal temperature of the home is maybe below freezing or right at freezing. So in an extreme example like that, possibly maybe slower, but in a general discussion where the internal of the home is above freezing, even 50, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not going to be slowed. It's still 24 to 48 hours. So a couple minutes left. If there's any more questions, I can answer a few more. If there's questions that come up after, or maybe I don't get to all the questions, you can always email us, talk to our representatives, sales@sporecyte.com, or give us a phone call. You can also go to our website, and we have a little contact us form where you can send us a email that way as well. So just see if there's any other questions that come through before we close up our November webinar. All right, well, that looks like that's it. We're right at 30 minutes. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you joined late, there always is a recording of this that goes out the next day and is posted on our website as well. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.